There we go. Got that. And we'll start with just a roll call. McKee here, Bottom.
Aye, here.
Schultz.
Here.
Thomas.
Yeah.
And Counselor Nichols is not here tonight. Okay, then I will, Brad, do we have a flag to put up? Perfect. I will invite everyone to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. There we go. So agenda approval. Brad, do you want to walk us through any changes from staff to start?
Sure. Thanks, Mayor and Council. So a couple items just as normal. We have public comment opportunities at a couple different times. We have at open forum, which is for items that are not on the agenda, and then at each of the business items of planning, new and or planning unfinished and new business as well. We do have a 5-minute limit for people that speak, and I'll be timing that on behalf of the council. And at that time, I would mention that the time is up and the council could approve more time. A couple items for the agenda itself. On the agenda 7D is the May 13th minutes. We had intended to get those done and send them to you. We did not get those done, so asked to remove 7D. Just a note that 7E, the claims were sent out today to the council. They are on the website with the public packet as well. And then on 8D, when we get there, as noted by the mayor, council member Nichols is unable to attend tonight, and he has requested that that item be pushed or tabled to a future member because he's obviously not able to talk about it, but we can address how to approach that at the item. So really the only action item that I'm requesting is approve the agenda with removal of 7D.
Brad, can I ask a question, or Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead.
If someone was so inclined and they wanted to comment on something from new business, could they comment during general comment and be done with it? Or do they have to only specifically comment on something under the list at the time of that specific item?
Mayor and Council, I said it's completely up to you. If somebody on open forum wanted to say, I'm actually here to comment on a new business, however, I have to go, so it's why I'm here. Will you allow it? That's up to the council at that point.
Oh, okay. Just asking.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I think in general, it helps to have it kind of at those times, but if I think we can make exceptions as needed, you know, depending on the schedule and everything. That's fine with me.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah,
I'm totally fine with it too. I would just recommend if someone's going to comment during the open forum on a comment that's something on the agenda, they probably shouldn't be given the same opportunity again when the item comes back up.
right. Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't have an issue with it also.
Okay, sounds good. Then is there anything from council in terms of amending the agenda for tonight?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Perfect. Any discussion on that? Roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bottom.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
That carries. Thank you very much. Commission representatives, we have Meredith Wu from the Planning Commission and Alicia Hoffman from Parks and Trails. So thanks for joining us. I haven't seen if they're on, but I'm sure they're on there somewhere.
They are on.
If anything in your guys' wheelhouse comes up, feel free to raise your hand and chime in.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll just go ahead and move on to open forum. And is Jessica on, or Brett, are you?
I am.
Oh, there she is. Perfect. Jessica will walk us through.
If anyone here is wanting to participate in open forum, they can press *9 on their phone. Otherwise, they can press the participants button and raise your hand, or under the reactions button, there's a raise your hand function as well. At this time, no one's raising their hand. If you'd like, we could give it just a couple minutes. Hard
Sounds
moments.
good. Sounds good. See if any pop up. Otherwise, if not, we can go right on to, let's see, your presentations, none. So consent agenda, consisting of items 7A. Let's see, we removed D, correct, Red? So 7A, B, C, and then E through M. Does anyone want to
Mo-
pull anything?
Motion to approve.
Mr. Mayor, if I
Yeah.
may, I would have liked to have pulled item I.
Okay, item I, let's see here, which is D&D service site plan.
Correct.
Sounds good. Anything else?
So, Mr. Mayor, so if Councilor Bottom is willing, he could amend his motion
Oh,
to
I'm sorry, yes.
amend his
Yeah.
motion to allow for the pulling of Councilmember Schultz, item 7I with his motion.
I will pull.
Second.
Okay. So we have.
Do we have to vote on that?
Do we?
Can I pull it
looking
without a
Brad.
vote?
So
You
just a
didn't have
point
a
of,
second.
so point of clarification, I guess here. So I guess I assumed, Councilor Bottom, that you amended your motion to include pulling 7I, and then Alan seconded that. But if I heard that wrong, let me know.
Motion to approve amended to not include 7I, but include the rest of the consent agenda as listed in the packet.
Seconded as motion made.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? No.
Sorry, Mayor and Council.
Yep.
I believe there's been two motions made and seconded without a vote at this point then. So I think we still have to act on the original.
Which was?
Councilor Bottom, can you clarify what exactly
Yep.
your original motion was?
Yeah, it was to approve. We could vote nay, and that would be done with that. And then we could vote, and then we could start all over, right? If we can't have two motions on the table at the same time.
No, I'm sorry, you're correct, because that second motion was then to amend the motion, which would then be voted on, and then you would vote on the motion. I'm sorry. So we could continue the way we were. My apologies.
So, okay, we have one motion that's been amended, now voting on it, which was to pull I and approve everything else. So McKee, I, Bottom,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Okay, so going on to 7I, D&D service site plan.
Mr.
conditional
Mayor,
use approval.
sorry, I
Yes.
apologize. I believe that since that was just the motion to amend the motion, now we get to vote on the original motion.
Gotcha. My
That,
mistake.
that motion contained approval for everything but I. So my motion was to amend my original motion and approve all the items with the exception of 7I. I think it took care of both at the same time.
I'm happy to vote again. I need practice for the
either
rest
way.
of the night, so.
So worst case, that was to amend that motion. I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve consent agenda items A, B, C, E through H, J through M, which means just I is pulled.
Just a second. I apologize, Mr. Mayor. Jess is our resident expert. I off base here. I think we would actually still have to vote on the original motion by
Was that
Bottom,
not?
a second by Schultz, and we don't need another motion. Is that correct?
Well, I think it depends on if we were doing a friendly amendment, because if it was a friendly amendment, we could just go ahead and use the first vote, is my understanding.
It is a friendly amendment.
So I think the one vote is okay. Kendra, you've been to many more meetings than I have. Does that seem reasonable?
We didn't use the word friendly, but I believe it was a friendly amendment, and that vote moved the approval of the items. I agree.
Okay. That's
Thank
fine
you.
by me. So we're good. We've approved everything except for I has been pulled.
Yes.
Okay. So 7 I, the D&D service site plan, conditional use permit and variance. Alan, do you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted a question for staff. Kendra, if you could comment on how the D&D's site plan approval is different than Comlink's when that came through. If memory serves me, Comlink was not coming in with a proposal for an office facility at first. Is that the difference here?
That is one of the difference and probably the most important difference. That's correct. D&D is building their office building with attached storage space and then has plans for future buildings that they would need to come back for in the future. With that initial construction, they would construct their outside storage area on the west side of the lot. And you're right that when Comlink came in, they were building the accessory building first and the office building was a later phase.
Okay, thank you. That's the only question I had.
Okay. Anything else from the rest of council?
Sorry to jump in so quick, Alan, on
No,
approving.
that's fine.
Could have saved us 10 minutes.
Yeah, we got there in the end.
I'll make a motion to approve item I.
Second.
All righty.
Second. Wait,
I think Manoj got the second.
I thought he said
ahead
okay.
of you.
He did.
Any further discussion on that? Nope. Then I will, roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bottoма,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
That carries. Let's see here, planning business, public comment opportunity. This is for items 8A through D. And Jessica will walk us through that.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. If anyone would like to speak, you can go ahead and do so by pressing *9 on your phone. Otherwise, you can click under the reactions tab. You can click raise your hand and we'll go ahead and unmute you. You just state your name and address for the record and we'd be able to go ahead and take comment. Mayor, at this time, no one's raising their hand. If you'd like, we could wait a moment.
Sounds good. We'll give it a few seconds. Doesn't look like anyone's raising their hands, so we will go on to 8A, which is Napa site plan, conditional use permit, and variance. And Kendra's gonna walk us through that.
Yes, if Jessica can pull up the slides. This is a request for Napa for a new building south of their existing building at 19905 75th Avenue North, the former site of the Corcoran liquor store. And the conditional use permit is needed for auto repair sales, or auto retail sales, excuse me, does not allow repair or body work. And then a variance for a parking setback along County Road 116. The property is guided commercial in zone C1, which is neighborhood commercial. And the ultimate plan for the building includes the new Napa store plus 2 future retail bays. Next slide. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this item and voted 4-0 to recommend approval of the site plan and CUP, but denial of the 16-foot front yard parking setback where 25 feet is required based on the finding that the variance standards had not been met. That was at the April meeting, and the applicant spent some time looking at options for the site and trying to determine how to proceed. They then submitted revised plans that increased the size of the building from 60 to 80 foot deep and increased the ultimate building size from 15,200 to 16,000 square feet. They eliminated the loading dock, which allowed them to increase the building depth without decreasing the setback any further, but it remains at that 16-foot front parking setback that was requested of the Planning Commission. The staff report notes and a few other changes, and another significant change is the plan is now 2 phases. Only the 12,000 square foot, 12,800 square foot Napa store would be built now, and they're showing plans for the 2 future tenant spaces. The parking would all be constructed now for that future addition with phase 1. Next slide. This is the site, I think you're all familiar, on the northeast corner of 116 and 75th, next to West Side Tire. The existing building will be demolished to allow the construction of the new building. Next slide. And next slide. So on the left side of the screen, you can see the plan that was reviewed by the Planning Commission in April, and the plan that is currently being proposed this evening for review. And the general concept remains the same, but on the what looks like north, but is actually the west side of the building, you can see that loading dock that was on the original plan has been removed. That allows the building to slide back. And then they expanded the building to make it deeper than originally proposed. Next slide. We have been working with Napa. We're certainly excited to see them relocate in the city and grow their business. And so their original submittal had only a 10-foot setback from County Road 116. 116 has a 100-foot setback, but you can reduce that parking setback to 25 feet, which is a standard front yard setback. And so before the Planning Commission, we did reach out to them and suggest that they look at their plans to increase the setback to at least move the parking lot and landscaping out of the 10-foot drainage and utility easement. And in order to do that, they ended up shifting it to allow a 16-foot parking setback, and at that point then had the building depth modified.
Can I make a motion?
Sure.
Can I make a motion we approve with as written in the packet?
I'll second that.
Okay, sure. Any further discussion on that, Alan?
I'd kind of like to hear the rest of the presentation, to be honest with you, and I may have a few questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I probably would as well. But let's go ahead and vote on that. McKee, nay. Bottoма,
Aye.
Schultz,
Nay.
Thomas. I didn't hear it, but I'm assuming.
Oh, yes, aye.
Okay, so we're split.
Can we continue the presentation?
I think we have to if it's split.
Yeah, if it's
Yep.
split.
And Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarification, there are actually 2 resolutions in the packet, one for approving with the variance and one for approving and denying the variance. So there's actually a selection to approve.
Yeah. So let's, Kendra, if you could continue, and then we
Okay,
will.
I'll speed through it a little bit. So next slide, Jessica.
I'm not being disrespectful.
No.
I've read the packet. I'm prepared to make a vote.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay.
So this image is showing where you see the cloud that they have shrunk the building. They're not initially building those 2 tenant spaces any longer. That's different from what the Planning Commission reviewed. Next slide. Next slide. We'll skip through that. Additional landscaping is required along County Road 116 to screen the vehicle headlights. And then furthermore, additional landscaping is required to allow building setback flexibility. They're not meeting the 25-foot setback for the parking, but they are for the reduced building setback. The building setback does not meet the 100-foot setback, and so that's why that additional landscaping is required. Next slide. I think it's important to note that the access is going to change. The engineer has provided this drawing that will shift the eastern access closer to 116 in order to make it a safer access for vehicles entering the site. Next slide. Next slide. That's the new site plan. Staff did find that the conditional use permit standards and site plan standards have been met. The variance is for the parking setback, and I would note that if the building were shrunk 9 feet in depth from 80 feet to 71 feet. No variance would be required because everything could shift. Next slide. The Planning Commission did find that the variance standards had not been met, but if you go to the next slide, the recommendation has two options. Either move to adopt the first resolution 2153, approving the site plan and conditional use permit and denying the variance as recommended by the Planning Commission. But in your packet is also a second resolution 2153, which would approve the site plan, conditional use permit, and variance. If the Planning Commission recommendation were adopted, what it means is they wouldn't have to come back, but they would need to shrink that building 9 feet and shift everything west 9 feet to comply. So with that, you do have two choices in your packet for adopting resolutions.
Thank you very much, Kendra. Alan, you said you might have some questions. Do you want to start?
Yeah, if I may.
Sure.
Could staff give me a little bit more clarity around the parking lot setback? Is that setback from road right of way? And is it outside of the utility easement then, where they currently have it shown?
It is. So it is measured, setbacks are measured from the road right of way. And behind the road right of way, there is a 10-foot drainage and utility easement. And as I said, when we reached out, we wanted to at least make sure they were meeting that. It certainly does have some challenges on this site with the 100-foot setback that's standard. And so the 10-foot drainage and utility easement is measured beyond that right of way, and the parking is outside of that easement.
Okay. How does their variance request differ from what the parking lot to the north is, where Farmers Bank and Corcoran Pet Care is, and the current location of Napa?
It is closer to it reduces the setback from what it is today. So today the liquor store does meet the setback requirements.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm asking is they're requesting a 16-foot setback, right?
Correct.
And there's 3 commercial properties to the north. If you were to compare the same 16-foot setback, are those 3 properties closer than 16 feet currently?
Those 3 to the north are in fact closer. In fact, at least one is in the right of way.
Okay. With that said, I have no problem with the variance.
Okay. Anyone else had any questions or things they wanted to discuss?
None from me, Tom.
John, did you want to take a crack at a motion?
Yeah, could I make a motion to accept resolution 2153 approving the site plan, conditional use permit, and variance?
Second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bottoма,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
That carries. Thank you. Still got that through that pretty quick. 10, I'm sorry, not 10, 8B, grading expansion request for Rush Creek Reserve. Kendra will also be presenting.
Yes, the council approved a final plat for phase 1 of Rush Creek Reserve, which is the property just west of St. Thomas Catholic Church. And the request, as always, allows grading for the phase that has final plat approval. Recently, the applicant reached out and asked for approval to grade the entire site. That is not an unusual request. Normally, we like to see that come in with the final plat request, but we have approved those the city council, I should say, has approved those grading expansion requests for different phases in other projects, including Bass Lake Crossings and Tavera, and recently Ravinia, or in Ravinia and recently Tavera. So The engineer has reviewed it. Staff supports the request for expanded grading, which would allow grading of the entire site in compliance with the approved tree preservation plan. And that grading does not allow any utility or street work, however. So they still are not allowed to do utility or construction of streets outside of the phase 1 final plat, but would be allowed to grade the entire site in preparation for those future phases. Next slide. This is the gray area is the phase 1 grading plan, or phase 1 area where grading was previously approved. And so you can see to the east and west of that area, there's an expanded grading area that they're requesting approval to grade. Next slide. And again, staff does recommend approval of resolution 2154 to approve the grading expansion for MI homes for Rush Creek Reserve.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
for most of the projects that we have went through preliminary and they have part of it done, we've approved them with the understanding that they take the risk that different phases may, for whatever reason, not be approved.
Mhm.
So I don't have any questions.
Okay. Anyone else?
I have no questions. I think as John pointed out, they're taking the risk
Right.
on this deal. So
And just to clarify, just because I don't, just to make sure I understand right. So even if we approve the grading for outside phase 1, to Johnson Allen's point, we could not approve the future phases, and this doesn't keep us liable for anything to approve it, right? It's not like, hey, you approved the grading, so we have to just go through the process now. Stating the obvious.
Right.
Okay.
well, the point of clarification is we approve the preliminary plat on the whole parcel. So if they would have to come in with something wildly different than what
Right.
we've already approved for us to deny a future phase.
I think what Manoj meant, what I kind of interpreted that as was allowing this grading request wouldn't change the likelihood or way or anything of any future approval. It would be the same regardless if we denied it.
Yeah, it should not change the process in any way, shape, or
Yep.
form.
Yep.
Perfect.
That's
Thanks.
a good way of putting it. Perfect. And I will just note, I spoke to some of the neighbors in the area and to John Rask with MI, and I know there's been a series of meetings kind of with the neighbors, which I really appreciate, kind of trying to face things head on and make sure everyone's on the same page and work through any concerns. And I think that's it's noteworthy that they're taking that extra step, which I really appreciate. So with that, I will go ahead and entertain a motion to approve. Let's see, do we have a, excuse me, entertain a motion to approve resolution 2021-54 approving the grading expansion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bottoма.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
Thomas.
Hi.
That carries. 8C, request to reconsider application Cook Lake Highlands.
Mayor and Council, I'll jump on this quick here, and Kendra can help me out as well. Oops, I thought I had a slide. Maybe I put them in the wrong order. I'm sorry. Jess, there we go. My apologies. So we have a request in front of us from Beth Husted, the applicant, to request the council reconsider a substantially similar application that was recently denied. And the reasons it's in front of you, because our ordinance states that the applicant has to wait 6 months to bring a similar application forward unless the council authorizes that to proceed further. And over the last month or so, or weeks, I should say, as noted in Beth's letter, she's had significant conversations with the neighbors as well as a couple of council members, and she feels that she has a project that after further education and little tweaks that could be supported. So here in front of you is the changes. So it's regarding additional trees on lots, a height restriction on the United Properties portion, a possibility of MI homes, but definitely not guaranteed. The statement that the single family homes adjacent would be 1-story slab on grade, dealer walkout homes. And then keeping park and open space in the north property point as wooded buffer. Now that's really a council decision more than an applicant decision, but that was really the portion that she heard from the neighbors that they would be favorable towards this application. So really just interested if the council wants to approve the request to allow the reconsideration. If so, a new application has to be submitted, reviewed, go through planning commission and back to council again. So it doesn't go straight to council for consideration. My only other note would be that if the council's not going to support this, I would highly recommend not approving it, as it is a cost for the applicant to go through those processes. So I'll stop there. I believe the applicant's on, and of course, Kendra can answer questions too.
Thanks, Brett. Any questions from council for either Kendra or for Beth?
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Is there any part of this process, and I think if there was a rezone, it would, but is there any part of this process that has to pass 4-1?
Kendra, do you know that?
If it does require a comprehensive plan amendment, it would require a 4/5 vote. I think we would need more information. Beth believes it doesn't. I believe with the information I have, it does require a comp plan to down guide the property from mixed to medium residential. That would require that. If it does not require a comprehensive plan amendment, though, everything else is a simple majority.
Or go ahead, Jen.
I want to pay considerable attention to if something does require a 4-1 vote and one of us is not here. This is a very rare exception that somebody would want to have it immediately come to vote after losing a decisive vote the last time this was put up. So I would echo what Brad said, and if you're leaning one way, make it known so we don't have to have the applicant go through more efforts to get approval and spend that money and time. But I also would, I'd be open to pushing this off 2 weeks so Jeremy could be part of it if we actually have to rezone. If we have to go through a plan amendment, that would be a different sort of deal.
We wouldn't be voting on that aspect of it though, but just to get his sense of it, you mean?
Yeah, I know we wouldn't vote on it till after it goes through some processes. But let's just pretend that 2 people are still basically, we've seen this proposal multiple times. If 2 people are basically, this isn't going to happen, and the developer needs a 4-1 vote to make it happen, I don't want to go through the bother of putting everybody through this process again if it's going to get stuck. If this doesn't move the needle for people who historically have voted no, it's really important to stay with not putting. I'd rather have not go through that if this doesn't move the needle for anyone.
Gotcha.
Unless it's a 3-2. So that 4-1, 3-2 thing is important for me.
Gotcha. I would be fine tabling it to the 10th if that works for the applicant if that wouldn't cause another delay, that's would be a problem. I mean, I guess
if we vote, if 4 of us are okay with this, because I'm gone the 10th. So
okay.
So I'm prepared to vote for this, but I think enormous consideration has to be paid to some of the pinch points here. Just keep that in mind as you're voting.
Yep, absolutely.
Tom,
Yes.
so so based on what Kendra said, I'm going to go with staff's assessment to this, right? To John's point, if it needs a comp plan change, or if it needs to go from mixed to medium, I'd say push this out till Jeremy comes back. But with respect to John's question on, where are we leaning? One of my biggest concerns initially when I voted no and been consistently against the proposal was the residents or the neighbors and their feedback. Since our last votes, I know Beth has gone out of her way and has talked to the residents, had multiple meetings with stakeholders involved, and I've had a lot of residents reach out. And again, it's not a majority, right? Majority of us, but at least enough to know that the plan is at least acceptable to a few. So I am open to considering a reapplication. Now, will I approve the plan without seeing it? No, I have no way of saying that on record right now, but I would definitely be open to considering a change in vote when it comes back. But having said that, if it's to John's point, at that time I see something I don't like, and then suddenly Jeremy is on the camp that he's not going to, this doesn't move the needle enough for him, then we are back to a lot of pain for Beth on this one. So I feel like we should move this out 2 weeks and get the same discussion on the table then. That's just my thought.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say if it's a matter of if we think it needs the comp plan amendment, sounds like we don't know that at this point. Kendra, sounds like you believe we do. Beth believes don't. So maybe, do you think
we need some more information from the developer of the assisted living on what the units include to determine that. But the plan is unchanged from what you saw last time it was in front of you, with the exception of those really 4 items that Brad noted the applicant would change, and request for the city to take the park, which was not the Parks Commission recommendation at the time. So I think it's important to bear that in mind when you're thinking about what it will look like when it comes back. I certainly don't think we're going to have the answer to the comprehensive plan amendment, but until we get more information about the actual units within that assisted living facility.
Kendra, a quick question. So with the height restriction, does that change the number of floors, or they're just architecturally keeping it shorter than 49?
It is my understanding it's an architectural change only, that the unit count is the same as it was when you reviewed it and acted on it last time.
Got it.
The applicant has her hand up.
Yeah, Beth, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council and staff, I have spoken with the.
Oops. You muted yourself.
Oops.
Okay. I have spoken with the developer for the memory care, and we have discussed at length, and I reached out also to Met Council, as Kendra knows, and was able to get some clarification on what it is that they require in order to designate the rooms as units. And the memory care developer has said to me they're willing to meet that requirement and put the kitchenette into each of the rooms so that it can be counted as 32 units versus 1. So that just, Kendra wasn't necessarily aware of that. Apologize, Kendra. But that has been the most recent conversation. I didn't know that would come up this evening. So, and I've reached out to Met Council, and I believe that we we understand clearly what it will take to count those as 32 units, which would help in the. We're seeking not to have a comprehensive plan amendment.
Gotcha. So Kendra, if those 32 units were counted, would that likely tip the scale to not needing a comp plan amendment?
If you give me a second to check
Yeah,
the math here,
absolutely.
I like that. I wasn't prepared for that. Sorry.
No
I guess if
problem.
we voted, Mr. Mayor,
Mhm.
it's not as if all we'd be voting for is to give the applicant the opportunity to reapply if the stated statute is there must be a 6-month delay. All we're saying is, yeah, I guess you can apply again. It in no way implies there's a positive outcome or anything like that.
Mhm.
So I guess there can be language from Jeremy, but I'm not sure that it matters. If 3 of us say, yeah, you could potentially apply, then I guess it's up to Beth whether she does or not.
Right.
It doesn't bind her into that 6-month window at all.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Okay.
Yeah, to the same point, right? So I want to address this to Beth since she's here. So since this is in front of us, right, and I am favorable to it coming back, and that's what I'll vote on if there's a vote on this. But I want you to know, and this is back to what John said, right? There is going to be a risk associated with coming back. The fact that a lot of residents who reached out were supportive of your changes that accommodates their requirements is the reason I am tilting back to, hey, we want to consider this back again. But that's the risk that you're willing to take, right? We're not going to get binded that we will approve if it comes back with the changes just because we let you come back within a 6-month period. Just want to make sure that you're clearly aware of that. And I don't want it on me saying that, hey, you let me come back now, I expect an approval.
I'll make a motion. We approve the request to reconsider.
Second.
Any further discussion?
No.
McKee, aye. Bottoма,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
That carries 4-0. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I may, just thinking of the applicant, I don't think I'd have any idea of whether how many I get 1 or 4 votes for this type of project. So if any of you would like to just say these changes make it more likely, or I am no more likely, I'm sure the applicant would like to hear that. You don't need to do that, but I'm still just concerned the applicant doesn't have a real sense of whether these 4 things are helpful or make no difference for her prospects. Again, up to you, but I think the more open we can be with applicants, the better we are for doing business in town. So just a thought, you don't have to say anything.
Sure, I can start us off briefly. I think that these 4 or 5 changes, whichever you want to count it, they do help. Obviously, there's more to the process that I need to go through and check everything and make sure exactly where I am. But my sense right now is that they help me get to that from my previous vote. So that's where I am. Yeah.
So I can go next. So Beth, no guarantees from me. If that tilts the decision for you to come back or not, we'll approve right now. Your ability for you to come back, it's up to you to come back or not. The needle move, if the needle moved enough for the neighbors, it moves for me. So that's something that I'll be doing before your plan comes back with the full plan. So that's all I'm saying. I don't want to feel like we're giving you a secondary chance at a vote by saying that, hey, we'll allow you to come back, but now we're going to approve it. So this is not the vote, right? So it's a risk you're going to take. It'll be with the majority of what I'm hearing from the ground. So that will move the needle for me. So far, looks like that's what it's done, but this is not everything. So there is a due process to follow. So unfortunately, that's all I can do right now.
I'm happy to comment next. Beth and I have had several discussions and I've walked the property with her, so she knows what my questions and concerns are. So I'll just leave it at that. And if she would like to reach out to me again, feel free.
Good.
Yeah, I think I've gone into full bore information gathering mode, and the amount of data I have and the responses from the neighbors, but also being out there myself and understanding some of the limitations on the site and some of the expectations both from us, the Met Council, and the watershed, and the challenges within. I'm I'm more prepared now than ever to have the discussion and look at this, considering multiple different factors.
Sounds good. Hopefully that's helpful, Beth.
Thank you. I very much appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Right, of course. Alrighty, then we will go on to 10D, which is conditional uses in zoning districts. And as Brad mentioned at the beginning, during the agenda approval, looking to likely move this to either the June 10th meeting, which I guess would be my initial preference, or the June, I don't have my calendar in front of me, 24th meeting. Yeah.
Did we vote on the previous one, or is that, or that was just thought gathering?
We voted on it. Then Brad had us asked if we wanted to speak a bit on it afterwards.
That's why I went off.
Yep. Gave me a heart attack there for a second. Did we not? Okay.
Didn't we vote to move it out 2 weeks?
Are you on 10D here?
Well, 8D, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 8.
Sorry, I don't know why I keep saying 10. 8D, yes. Can we vote on moving that out to 2 weeks?
No. 2 weeks ago, we voted on moving that discussion to tonight.
Correct.
Tonight, we're going to have the expanded discussion with information and have the city attorney here.
Mr. Mayor, if I
Yes,
may,
of course.
sorry, just as far as recap, it was put on the agenda by Council Member Nichols. The previous meeting, it was asked to get pushed out to have further discussion at this meeting here. Now, as you know, Councilmember Nichols is unable to attend, so the request was from Councilmember Nichols was to push it out. I did have the city attorney lined up tonight, but I actually said, since it was likely to be pushed away, that we could continue that meeting till the future, and I apologize if that's an error on my part. The reason I'm suggesting moving to the 24th actually is now because the city attorney actually has a conflict on the 10th, if you want the city attorney present for that. However, I guess I look at this as a two-step approach. There's two parts of this. There's one is, should the council do this? Is it good policy? And then after that, it's what are the implications if we want to do that? And I know for some of you, the legal portion is important for the other discussion too. So what I would recommend, if you want the city attorney at the meeting so all of you can talk, we certainly would likely push the 24th. I could certainly also, navigate times where each of you could speak individually to the city attorney separately and keep it on the June 10th meeting as well. So
can I make a motion that we
go.
move the discussion to the 24th? Sorry, Brad. You're getting to this, building to that.
I second that.
Is it possible to move the work session then to the 24th too, and
That's my concern.
Roll it in together? I mean, it's more important for me to probably have the attorney there than have it as part of the joint work session, but
yeah, that's why I was thinking the 10th.
Maybe we could just discuss it on the 10th and then hash it out with the attorney in the regular meeting on the 24th.
Yeah.
Was it 4th or 7th? I'm fine with that too, I guess.
Okay.
What is the topic of the, what's the topic of the special session?
It's the residential district standards regarding the cluster type housing that the council is looking at.
So that will impact this vote somehow? Is that the?
No, Mayor and Council, just believe it's because both the Planning Commission and Council are already together. Why not use the brain power regarding this topic as well, is what I guess I kind of assumed you were thinking about.
Both are big enough topics that I wouldn't merge them, and I would keep them separate. Keep that planning session as such, and plan for this in a separate session with the attorney.
You would not have this as a discussion topic at that work session on the
Yeah,
10th?
I mean, we don't have to pigeonhole into this. Like, this is one policy that we want to debate and figure out if it's the right policy and if it has legal implications, right? That's why we wanted that
Okay.
only in that discussion. But the
Okay.
planning discussion, that's broader, right? That's broader with respect to cluster and stuff. So I would decouple it, but I don't have an issue if we decide to go together. But just my thought there.
Okay. So we did have a motion and a second for tabling it to the June 24th meeting, was it, John?
Yeah.
Okay.
And do we need remarks on whether we combine the two, or is it just sufficient to move this to the 24th? I mean, that's a these are two separate topics. I just want to have it be, if there's a concern to the council and we want to combine this and the other topic, then we should consider that as part of whether we move it and when we move it to. But if this is, in my opinion, this is a separate thing, and we don't have to have it be part of a co-council and planning commission meeting if it doesn't pass on the 24th.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Can I ask staff a question?
Sure.
If we are to if we found time on the 10th to discuss it, would we have to post that with a public announcement first?
Jess is the technical answer here, but if we wrote something
I
such
think
as,
it
go
would.
ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it depends on how I write the notice, so I can have it be a little bit to encompass both. So I can certainly make sure that our notice allows for that. When we have special meetings, we do have to say what the topic is. So I can be sure to include both. And if we don't fully have a topic on one or get through a large discussion on one, as long as we've noticed that we'd be talking about it, we'd be fine.
Okay. That makes sense to me, Alan, to do it like that. And if we have the time, we can bring it up and get some feedback. And if not, we just go the other way.
That's what I would prefer.
Okay.
Brad, can I make a request? Mr. Mayor, can I make a request of Brad?
Sure.
Somehow it'll make sense when I say it, but I want the city attorney's opinion, because I talked to the League. I didn't know Jeremy wasn't going to be here, but I talked to the League of Minnesota Cities and asked them to opine on the topic. And they said, you need to rely on your city attorney because he knows the ins and outs of it. And this is a heavy topic constitutionally. So I would rather have our city attorney's remarks be in public and on record, rather than the five of us get together and talk about what the attorney said to us each individually, and then let the attorneys, our five interpretations of what the attorney said, become part of the record. It's really important to, I think, have the attorney's own words be part of the public record on a topic with such gravity.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think even with potentially having it at that work session for, if we have extra time, if we're still moving the council discussion of it to the 24th, that would be the case.
Yeah. To John's point, though, I do see his point about having legal counsel there for direct comment and discussion.
Mhm.
And if we don't have that, I guess I would probably hate to post it to the public that we're going to have a discussion on something that we may or may not have a discussion on, because I know people are reaching out already and want to be part of an open discussion. So maybe we just not discuss it at all then on that day and leave it till the 24th.
Okay. So that which was John's initial motion, that's been seconded anyway, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just to move this discussion. We're not changing the plan. I mean, the joint session, right? We're just moving this topic to 24th.
Is there anything further on that? If not, go ahead and roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bottom,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
All right, that carries. Thank you guys. And staff, I guess it seems like the council decided they'd prefer not to do the split on that work session on the 10th. So let's go ahead and plan not to do that and have everything, all the discussion on the 24th.
Thank you.
Alrighty. 9, unfinished business, public comment opportunity. Jessica.
Thank you, Mayor. If anyone would like to speak now on any of the unfinished business items, you can do so by pressing *9, or if you're on your phone, otherwise under the reactions button, there is a raise your hand button that you can press. Then you go ahead and state your name and address for the record, and go ahead and do so now. Mayor, at this time, no one is raising their hand.
Okay, give it a few seconds just to make sure. And not seeing any, so we will go on to 9A, which is Hackamore Road Improvement Plan Update. Brad.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor and Council. And really my role here is to introduce Jim Stremmel with WSB, who's going to be walking through a presentation that Jessica will be navigating, Jim, I believe. So once she pulls that up, it's all yours.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Administrator, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm the project manager that's been working on this project here for now about 1.5 years. For those of you who are on the council, last year I gave a kind of a similar formatted presentation with 30% design. And then we worked on that LRIP grant this spring, and council authorized the preparation of 75% design. Now, before I get too much further, can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. Next slide. And so the presentation today will be about the 75% design. I'm going to go through some background information for those who are unfamiliar with the project to a great degree. And then I'll get into some more detail about some existing conditions and some of the proposed planning work that we've been doing here, especially this spring, and then get into some more detailed review of the plans and so forth. Feel free to ask any questions at any point. And then at the end, we'll talk about some next steps and so forth.
Can I ask a question right off the bat?
Absolutely.
I need some clarity on what 75% design means, as opposed to 100 or 50 or 10.
Sure. So I think, and I'll put it this way, I'll maybe relate back to 30%. So during 30% design, we typically identify a lot of the issues that we see, significant issues that we see with the project. At 75%, we typically resolve most of the large issues. There's still some minor things, minor details we have to work on with final design, but I think the way I look at 75% is that you really identified and resolved those major issues that you have been working through the process.
Thank you. Fair enough.
Yep. Next slide. So the project is located on Hackamore Road here. It starts a little bit west of Medina Lake Drive. As we go east here, crosses County Road 116, and then it also goes up to County Road 101. And then with 30%, we did look in more detail at the east side of 101. With 75%, we kind of left that area alone. The city of Plymouth is working on a county turnback project, excuse me, with Hennepin County for County Road 47, which is that portion east of 101. And so they've been doing some preliminary design work there. They've been some surveying and so forth with their consultant that they hired, and are working on some plans for 30%. And so it sounds like in the next month or so that they might be reaching out to some of the stakeholders and cities and so forth. And that'll likely include the city of Corcoran and city of Medina and Maple Grove and whatnot as part of that 30% design effort. At this point, we're not sure how that project is going to be laid out, but it's likely that this westerly portion that'll include that part east of 101, and might even include part of 101 or that portion of the signals there. We're not sure yet, but it's likely that would go first and might even be constructed as early as 2022. So look for some more information on that as they do their public engagement efforts for their project. Next slide. So a little bit of background here. This is a joint project with both the cities of Corcoran and Medina. The city boundary kind of splits Hackamore Road in half. We did complete 30% design last year in 2020 when we were authorized for 75% here in February 2021. Tonight we're going to talk about that results of 75% design. The idea here was really to develop a cohesive plan that can guide both cities in their planning efforts to address deteriorating pavement and other infrastructure, improve the existing access points, both public and some of the future development locations, consider some of the stormwater treatment opportunities and ways to work with some of the adjacent property owners and developers with some of the stormwater. That's something that we did work a lot on with 75% design, because that was one of the big issues that we identified with 30%. We identified or refined the right-of-way needs, and we showed that on the plans that were provided with the memo in the packet. And then also to improve the pedestrian mobility through the corridor. We've designed in a trail on the north side of the roadway, and talk more about that too as we get into the more detail. Next slide. So here's pictures of some of the existing conditions. Now these are the pictures I took in 2020. The one on the left-hand side is looking west towards County Road 116, and you'll notice it's a rural section roadway, not terribly wide, 2 lanes. It's got gravel shoulders. In this particular view, it's a good example of some of the challenges that we have with the wetlands on both sides. We've got some power poles that are in the way there, and some other things. You can see the condition of the pavement and so forth. The center picture also a good pavement condition indicator. I know this spring some of those conditions even got a little bit worse. So there was that the staff contended with. And then you can see in that middle picture some development on the right-hand side, and there's other locations where that's occurring too. And then on the right-hand picture, looking east towards 101, now you see here a bit of an urban section with some bituminous curb and some shoulders and so forth. So the section does vary a little bit, but it's generally rural through most of the corridor, with the exception of this piece here by County Road 101. Next slide. So I'm going to get in some of the project design elements here. Next slide. So a little bit of comparison between 30 and 75, and Councilmember Watema here kind of asked the question about what is the difference between these two, and so I kind of replied with identifying some of the issues and then resolving those. With 30%, we did perform more in-depth public stakeholder engagement activities. We had a neighborhood meeting, which ended up being virtual. We originally scoped it as being a public in-person meeting, but with pandemic kind of occurring very quickly during that time, we pivoted and had a website that we set up with a social pinpoint, where we had some mapping and we did some overlays with the 2 options, geometric options that we were considering at that time. And folks were able to flip back and forth through those and provide comments on that website. And then we actually had a virtual open house then after that, and we reviewed some of the comments. And actually we had quite a bit of turnout at that time, and probably more than we may have had if had been in person. And so we had some good discussions about the project at that time. We put together some project estimates too, and then we had the city staff reviews and council recommendations at that time. And generally, the option 2 was considered to be the most preferred. Now, the difference between those at that time was option 1 had that dedicated center left turn lane throughout the corridor. Option 2 was the one where we got rid of that center turn lane where we didn't need it, and then just had the turn lanes at the intersections. So that was the one that both councils generally favored.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah. Yes,
I'm looking in our packet to see how much, going from 30 to 75% design. The question on the table is whether we authorize that, but I don't see a cost associated with that. Am I missing something?
With the 75% design?
Yeah, what we're voting on is are we approving the money that goes into the 75% design, or are we actually approving the design tonight?
No, tonight, we're just looking at the design tonight. We're not, we're not asking council to even discuss the funding at this point. We just want to get through the design and have the councils reaffirm their support for the design that we put together.
Okay. So all of this was in the packet. So can I make a motion to approve?
Sure. Someone want to second it? If not,
I'd kind of like to hear the rest of it, John, unless you got a date tonight or something.
No, but I guess this is in the packet and I'm comfortable with it. So I'm comfortable proceeding.
I kind of like, to be honest with you, when we picked the design at 30%, there was a recommendation. I can't remember exactly what it was, but to have like a dedicated bike lane.
Okay.
Then does that come into play here? Can you talk about that at least?
I sure can. That's a good segue. How about we flip to the next slide? So some of the proposed improvements did include looking at paved shoulder. So we have a 6-foot paved shoulder throughout the whole corridor with that, I'll call it an 8-foot trail on the north side. Now, where we have it adjacent to actual concrete curb, we did have to widen that to 10 feet to meet the clear zones. But so we have those kind of two elements for the pedestrian and bicycle connectivity, that the trail and then the paved shoulders on both sides. And go to the next slide and you kind of see what that might look like graphically. Kind of have the three kind of main typical sections through the corridor. We got a 34-foot section with 2 lanes and those bike shoulders. I'll call them bike shoulders, but they're just paved shoulders. The middle one is the design with the single turn lane. And then we've got the 2 turn lane version here with the 53-foot wide roadway. That does not include the trail. Would you like me to look at the role planning and talk a little more specifically about the design?
Well, I asked for a vote and nobody agreed with me, so you can keep with your presentation.
Okay.
I think you guys did a good job preparing for the meeting. I mean, like
Okay.
the handouts and everything.
Well, good.
And so
All right.
it's efficient for me to make a decision. But you can just, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm prepared to vote.
Well, the next slide here, we can have Jessica switch to the role plot and we can just go into a little more detail. Maybe I can just talk about some of the maybe changes and updates we did here with 25% design. That might help put some of it into context. So I call it a role plot because it's kind of a long plot of the project, and it's easy to look at because there's not separate pages. It's all kind of one document or one PDF here. And so we can kind of stay up on towards the top half there with the image and maybe just zoom in just a smidge. There we go, perfect. So here's kind of the westerly maybe quarter of the project. This is County Road 116 is to the right there. So we're looking west of County Road 116. On the north side is the Tavera development. South side is what's called Foxbury on the Medina side. In this particular quarter, we did look at a lot about stormwater management. And initially we had a rural section here with 30%, but there was some opportunity to work with the developer to the north, Tavera. And so we did that. And to do that and to actually collect some of the stormwater, we decided to go with curb through here. And that allowed us to collect stormwater from both sides, meet the watershed and the other treatment requirements by conveying that to the future development to the north. So this is something that I think the Public Works Director has, and the city's engineering team has worked with them on. And so this is kind of a graphical representation of what that'll look like. It didn't change the geometrics at all, but it did allow us to capture some additional water. You want to just start scrolling to the right. So we'll go just to the east part of 116 here. Now there's a couple of parcels on the north side here where we did design a future development access for. Now that's just kind of a guess at this point. There's no plans submitted for this development that I'm aware of. On the south side, we have a fairly large wetland complex and some existing single-family residential homes. The trail location you see on the north side there, where kind of juts out, I think is kind of what we're considering a preferred alignment. What it does is gets it away from the street. It reduces the wetland impact. There's kind of a small wetland there. Maybe just kind of changes the alignment a little bit and creates maybe a feature there for that trail. We're looking kind of a little bit to the right there. We see a stormwater pond. So it's one of the other stormwater elements that we added. Now, in this particular case, you see the stormwater pond. It's a very development. That particular pond will be further in the development, so we didn't show that on the plan sheet. But this pond will help address the stormwater management issues in this area, and that's something that the city will have to work with the adjacent property owner on if that does end up getting developed. There was a resident on Hackamore Circle that did talk about their drainage in their rear yard there. The corner property, you'll see part of that pond kind of juts out there, and that's intended to help convey some of that stormwater from their area. And with final design, some of that'll have to be refined and kind of figure out to a greater degree, but kind of gives you an idea what a size of that pond might need to be to treat the stormwater on Hackamore in that area. Maybe scroll to the right a little bit more. Yeah, that's good right there, yep. So in this area, now on the south side, Medina has a development that we are actually more recently working with. You'll see it on the south, a future development access point there. Then there's a property to the left that's still a private property owner, their single family home. And then that same development owns the other side. So they kind of have a fork that kind of surrounds that property. And so in those areas, we've asked them to convey or collect the stormwater from Hackamore on both sides there. We have curb on the north side, and we did that for a couple of reasons. One is we wanted to shift the trail south away from those residential homes there. With 30%, we had kind of pushed that up and kind of tried to equalize that a little bit, but they've got some landscaping, some other things. So we wanted to keep that south to avoid impacting those single family homes there. And then with the stormwater, we're able to have catch basins on both sides and then convey that to the south. Very similar to the Tavera development, but in this case, it's going south into the reserve of Medina. We can keep kind of going east here. The other reason we lowered or shifted the road south here, that's good right there, was to avoid power poles. So we're not completely avoiding all of them, but it'll be much less of a relocation effort than it would be if we had moved that trail to the north. One of the comments that came out of the City of Medina meeting was to discuss with the utility companies on what the cost might be to put the overhead power lines or other utility lines underground. That's something that we are discussing with them. We had a utility coordination meeting here for this project last week, and something that we brought up. There will certainly have to be more discussions about that. We did review the available franchise agreements for both cities, and there's a matrix that's included with the memo on the packet as well. And so for the most part, it looked like that the utility companies were responsible for relocating utilities in the right of way that are impacted with construction. But typically that doesn't include changing from going from overhead to underground. So there's likely going to be a cost associated with that, but that's something that can be done here moving forward. In this particular area here, this is kind of the Ravinia development on the north side. And then on the south side is what's called the Wild Meadows. And in here, we've got a little bit of curb on the north side in and around Steeplechase, but on the south side, it's maintained as a rural section. So we're kind of splitting the flow here through this corridor as far as the stormwater management goes. There was some residual capacity in the Ravinia pond that we were utilizing for that turn lane, essentially, and a little bit other impervious that we could. But then it does go back to kind of a rural section as you get past the right-hand turn lane. Once you scroll a little bit further to the right, up to 101 there. So the last section here is kind of the easterly quarter of it. You'll see another stormwater pond. Again, these parcels on this corner here are some that were a part of that Eagle Brook Church submittal here about a year ago or more. And at that time, we were optimistic that we might be able to work with adjacent development to deal with some of the stormwater management. That application has since gone away, but we're still leaving this stormwater area here for reference with potential for future development, kind of like that piece by 116, east of 116, again, kind of a placeholder. It kind of shows you what the area and the volume might be to treat that part of the stormwater. Generally, this is the the north half of the roadway that is being conveyed to that stormwater pond there in that area. As we get closer to the intersection, we are adding curb on the north side, partly because we've got some grade issues there with to keep the trail, and push the trail closer to the roadway. We have some grade issues in that lot there, so we're kind of allowing for some flexibility. We have like a hatched trail area there too. And that's to show maybe what might be the preferred alignment, kind of depending on how the development might go, how the intersection here at 101 might go. We're trying to provide some options here for the construction because I'm not sure how that all might lay out here when final design proceeds or the project is implemented for that area there. So kind of gives you an idea of what we have. And there's a couple of culvert crossings here too. There's call it a creek that kind of runs through here. It crosses once from the north and then goes around and kind of crosses again from the south closer to the intersection. So we have to replace those culverts and extend them too, because we are widening the roadway in this area as well. So that kind of gives you kind of a real quick, brief overview of some of the 75% design elements here. We didn't really change a lot with the geometrics per se. We did shift the roadway here and there, something you probably don't really even notice on here. We did eliminate one turn lane over by Hunter. I talked about moving that trail to the south. That was one of the elements that we decided to eliminate to allow for that. We looked at our analysis, and that one is kind of borderline. So we decided that to get that trail away from those properties there, the power poles and so forth, and I thought that was a good idea. So that was really the only major geometric change that took place.
Is there where your graph is back there, if you wouldn't mind moving back to the right, back to the intersection of 101 and Hackamore? Do you have factored in the elimination of that elevation in the road where it goes up and down? Can you talk about how flat that's going to be?
So if you can scroll the map up a little bit so you can see the lower half of the plan here. Now this is what we call our profile view. And so we did look at what the site distance is there. And so what we're doing is we're going to lengthen the curves on each side of it and then lower the top of that curve there at least a foot. That's probably closer to 1.5 feet. So it's going to be a much smoother curve, and we're not getting rid of the curve, but we are reducing that. Not only that, and then the approaches on each side. We are dealing with some adjacent grading challenges on the north side there, but depending if development does proceed, maybe we can even lower it further if they're amenable to impacting more of their property.
So how much
is a happy balance here?
Yeah, I guess my question is how much do you have to lower it? Assuming someone is cresting the top of the hill at the speed limit, how much do you have to lower it for them to come to a safe stop with, let's say, 3 cars at the stoplight?
We're lowering it about a 1.5 feet.
Foot and a half, if I'll give you enough sight line that you'll be able to see that there's cars parked there.
Yeah, and we're raising the curve a little, the approach curve just to the left there a little bit. We're raising that up about a foot as well. So there's a few curves here that we're modifying to make that approach better and to meet the sight distance guidance that we typically use for these types of design elements.
Okay, because I can attest to the accident-prone state of that intersection, especially if the roads are icy or you're approaching, when the sunlight levels are low. I shouldn't say the levels are low, but the angle of the sun is low, in the spring sky or fall sky, and you're looking directly into the sun, and all of a sudden there's 4 cars stopped in front of you. So I'd like to make sure we make that as safe as can be for the cars traveling to the east.
About 125, 150 feet there. So we are keeping that grade, less than 2%. This profile is kind of stretched out in the vertical so you can see everything. So the horizontal and the vertical are not the same scale. That helps to kind of magnify the vertical so you can see some of those elements. So it's not, you're looking at this and you think, oh, geez, it looks really steep, but it is kind of magnified in the vertical direction.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on this map at all?
Good.
Well, we can switch back to the presentation. I can just finish up the last few slides here. Sorry, my cat was crying here. We'll need to get to the bathroom. And then we talked about some of the stormwater already. I don't need to go into any more detail on this unless there's some additional questions, but this kind of gives you an idea of kind of where that stormwater is going and how it's kind of split between the two cities. Are there any more questions on that aspect of it?
None from me.
All right. So then as far as the project cost goes, we didn't split it up into phases this time. Just not sure how things might be split up into phases. That might be a discussion that's had here in the future, but it might also be kind of determined by which developments go first and what some of the agreements are with those developments. You can go to the next slide. But we did split up into the different elements. So we got street, trail, a wetland mitigation item, storm sewer, and then we got some of the intersection costs. And so we're coming up with a total project cost. Now that includes construction, who's 10% overhead and 25%, or excuse me, a 10% contingency and a 25% overhead. And so that total is $6.7 million for the entire corridor. And that includes all those elements that are shown there.
So how does the cost projections change from the 30% to 75% design? I'm assuming you're coming to firmer numbers.
We are coming to firmer numbers. We actually, the wetland mitigation went down a little bit. We actually kind of identified more of those areas. Storm sewer went up a little bit because we did add some additional storm sewer. And we actually did a lot of more storm sewer design. So that's, firming up numbers like that. Street improvements are also firmed up, and we've identified some additional curb areas and things like that. We've also had an increase in actual costs themselves in the last year or two. I mean, a lot of talk about material costs and some of those types of things. So we did use, some current bids that we received here this spring. And so there is kind of a, I would call it maybe a 4% increase over just of those types of material costs since last year. So that's kind of been incorporated in there as well. So there were some changes and some refinement of the cost here. Yes.
Do you know what the original number was at 30%?
For option 2, I believe it was like 6.4 million. For option 1, which was a little bit wider, I believe it was like 6.8 or 6.9 million. So we're somewhere kind of in between there now.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Next slide. So it talks a little bit about funding sources. Obviously, we talked about the developments, some of the contributions they may make. We have not heard back from the LRIP grant application we put in. When we put that in, they told us they had an overwhelming amount of applications. So they're having to take more time to go through those. So we'll see if we get any money out of that, but up to 1.25 million potential there. Of course, we got city funds. We did design this to meet the state aid requirements. So that's also a potential funding source the cities could look at. There's cost sharing opportunities with the county at the intersections, and then City of Plymouth and Maple Grove on that east end. That'll have to be kind of worked through with any final design. From what I understand, both city staff are not proposing to recommend formal assessments. And then I just want to make a note here that construction really could occur in a series of projects over several years with multiple partners and sources, and that could be with the county, the different cities, or the developers. So it really may not even be constructed all at once. It could be multiple pieces here over a number of years. Next slide. So next steps, I can go to the next slide too. This is kind of the last slide of anything meaty on it here. So tonight we're really looking just for any comments or input here on the 75% design. and then to affirm support for that 75% design and vision. And then ongoing after this meeting, the city staffs will and councils should plan for future meetings to discuss some of the funding aspects of this. Obviously looking for further stakeholder coordination, and then working collaboratively with the adjacent development on the project implementation. And what this plan provides the cities is as a guide, really, when those developments do come in. It's going to be a valuable resource to help with those negotiations and truly accommodate then some of the improvements that need to be made along this corridor. So I think that was it's going to be a really valuable piece for the cities with what you have now to use for that. So I guess with that, the next slide, it just could answer any more questions anyone has, or other comments that I can address.
Any other questions from council?
None for me. Thank you for the presentation.
Manoj?
Well done, thorough. Nothing from me. I just wanted the presentation for people. I mean, it's a lot of people on Hackamore Road, and if they're called in, I just wanted them to run through the presentation. But I'm pretty comfortable with what's in there.
Okay, and I think John was ready, so I'm assuming he still is. Let's see here, John.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the time, council members and mayor. And we'll be working with city staff here to wrap this up and whatever else is needed for 75%.
Thanks for all the work you did, and I am prepared. Thanks, Tom.
It's your motion, John.
Just the motion was still out there. There was never died yet. So the motion.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Come on, you beat me to that.
Any further discussion on it? All right, roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bodema?
Aye.
Schultz?
Aye.
Thomas?
Aye.
There we go.
And Mr. Mayor, just to jump in here too, yeah, Jim certainly did a lot of good job here, but Kevin and Kent from our team put a substantial amount of effort in this project so far. So I just want to highlight their efforts too.
Yeah,
thank you
everyone involved. It's fantastic. I am missing a page here. Give me 1 second. There we go. So we are on 10A, or just before 10A, another public comment opportunity. So this is for items 10A through 10E, and Jessica can walk us through that.
Thank you, Mayor. If anyone wants to participate, they can press *9 on their phone. Otherwise, they can, under the reactions tab, can press raise your hand. Mayor, it looks like there is someone who has raised their hand to speak. I'm going to go ahead and ask them to unmute and say their name and address for the record.
Sounds good.
It's a caller ending in 8753.
Go right ahead.
If you're on your phone, you can press *6. That should unmute you.
There we go.
Hey, good evening. My name is Greg Hogan. I'm at 19220 Hackamore Road. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to just briefly touch on 10B. But before I do that, I just want to make a comment, and you can take it for whatever you want, but twice tonight, both in the Napa presentation and just the presentation that was just ended on Hackamore Road, which was fantastic. People make a choice to either come to City Hall or to listen to a meeting to get informed. And twice tonight, within a couple minutes, John made a motion to basically approve before the presentation is even made. And it's both a brand new building, Napa, and there's people on Hackamore Road that are really interested in a road that affects them. And the presentation was great. So I just remind you, and I know what you'd say, it's in the packet and the people could look at it. They're not calling in they're calling in to get some information, And part of that is your role is to let, if there's a presentation, to let the person make the presentation. That would be a comment I have. Secondly, on the construction hours discussion, I want to go back. I lived next to Ravinia, and back on 2014 when they started, both from 7 a.m. to 10 at night, we had 300,000 square feet of dirt moved right 50 feet from my house, and my house was rocking all day and all night. I do not really understand why somebody needs to be moving dirt at 10 at night. I'll let you guys make that determination. And or on the weekends, there was consistent violations, especially in the fall, where they're worried about winter and what have you, and they'd sneak out at 7 in the morning. And if you're going to both talk about the hours, especially for the Tavara residents here, I see no reason these guys need to be out there at 10 at night. And secondly, maybe just confirm the procedures that if a resident or even a council person sees them violating these rules, what is the penalty for the developer? You're certainly all over the Corcoran residents on nuisance violations and giving them a couple weeks to fix it and what have you. But in addition to discussing the hours, it would be great to have a little discussion on what happens when the developer violates the rules. Those are my comments tonight. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Greg.
Mr. McKee, do I get an opportunity to defend myself since I
Sure.
was specifically addressed?
Yep, go right ahead, John.
So I think it's fair for me to make a decision based on what is in the packet. And our packets were 3 inches thick, and all of my concerns were addressed in the packet. I did a lot of research outside the meeting, and I was comfortable with the topic even before the presentation, and nothing in the presentation assuaged my opinion because everything in the presentation was already in the packet. So I feel like if I have enough information to make a decision, I'm prepared to make a decision. And in both instances, that was the case. So if we've got 13, if we have, 52 decisions to make in a night, I'm okay making a couple without a presentation. It doesn't insult the presenter if they already did such a good job preparing that I'm prepared to make a decision. So plenty of times I listen to a presentation and I need the presentation. 2 out of 52, I don't, and I feel prepared to make a decision. So that's why I asked and advocated for an early decision, because there's so much information in the packet. I felt like we had enough.
Makes sense. Thanks for clarifying all that, John. And I think I don't think there was any bad intent by you whatsoever, John, with that. I think it's just a style and on a specific thing to what you said. So, but I appreciate the discussion.
I think part of it is Greg likes to needle me, so he's having fun with that. But okay, proceed, please.
Okay. Is there anyone else with their hand raised, Jessica?
No, Mayor, there is not at this time.
Alrighty, then we will go on to 10A, which is the Public Works Building Improvement on Kane Road. Brad.
Mayor and Council, just a quick one here, at least I think. We had some pretty bad hail damage actually last year all around kind of northern half of Corcoran, which include our Public Works building and also our old Public Works building. And doing the research regarding replacement of tinning for the old Public Works building on Kane Road, it's in really poor shape all over. So Pat worked to obtain a quote actually last year to retin the sides additionally. The top would be covered by insurance, but the sides would not. We got a quote for $34,500 last year. We recently talked to the contractor again, Ebert, and he was able to retain the pricing as of last year. It's really looking for an opportunity to just retain the entire building and move forward. I will note that in the packet, I talk about using the long-range planning fund potentially as a funding source. I know the mayor and I at least had a conversation, and I had some heartburn with using that type of funding source towards this type of project. I do believe it's a good time and good price to get this project done. We also could just spend money out of the general fund. It'd be going over the budget essentially a little bit for this year. It's a $6 million budget, and we're 30 grand over in one category. I think we can handle it. I do recommend proceeding forward, but I'm very open to using a different funding source. So with that, I'll stop and answer any questions you have.
Okay. Any questions for Brad?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah.
Brad, I think the building's estimated at 60 years old. Are we just retenting a building that's surpassed its useful life, and what are we using the building for? Does it require any type of other upgrades? Is it a heated building, non-heated building? Is it just cold storage?
Yeah, Council, there's one heated bay and the rest is cold storage. And this really was the entire shop for the entire Public Works fleet for many, many years, which is almost difficult to fathom. But, the bones are in decent shape. It is old. Putting up a new structure of this size would be a significant investment. And it's really doing what we need it to do as far as just store equipment. Ideally, when one of the action items for this year is to think long-term campus planning for the city of Corcoran. And, it's a smaller site and maybe it doesn't make sense for forever extra storage for Public Works, but it probably does for the next 10 to 15 years. So I think it's a good investment to get us, another decade down the road with some much needed storage.
So do we think that these improvements, if we were to do them, would get us that next 10-ish years without another substantial improvement needed to the building?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Barring another weather event, which would cause another
Right.
insurance claim.
Right. Okay.
If it's for whatever it's worth, Mr. Mayor, I have a 50-year-old barn reskinned. And so long as the timbers have been kept dry, the building can last another 50 years.
Gotcha.
And I spent a lot more than the city is going to spend on retinning my barn. And so for my opinion, it's a really good value, only
Gotcha.
specifically because I just had mine done for more than this. You end up with a really nice looking product.
All right, good to know. Regarding the fund that we would pay for this, what are your guys' thoughts on, like Brad mentioned, either the initial thought of the long range planning fund or just taking it out of the general fund?
I don't think it qualifies as long-term planning per se.
Mhm.
It is a long-term spend. So my preference would, it's a capital expenditure. Those typically come from the regular budget. Is that right, Brad?
Well, we do have a capital improvement plan. I guess that's another way where we could park it. And then every 2 years when we go out for our 2-year investment, if there is a deficit because there's not enough funds there, we would essentially just factor that deficit into our future annual budget cycles. So we also could park it in our 416 capital improvement fund.
Okay.
Either way, we have to find funds for it. So it really doesn't
Right.
make a big difference.
Are we doing anything with the overhead doors on this? I didn't see it in the quote.
Gosh, I'll have to follow up on that. I don't
I
have
can-
a. Oh,
I can
Kevin's
jump in,
here.
Brad, if you want me to real quick.
Yeah, that'd be
Please.
great.
We've already, if you look at the pictures, we've actually replaced 2 of the 3 doors. So there's only 1 door that remains to be replaced. So we have been kind of incrementally, making those improvements. So there are no garage door improvements with this. We would replace that 3rd door eventually through part of our annual, building maintenance public works fund that we use at an appropriate time.
Okay, all right. So that's what I was just wondering. We're going to put new tin on something and have 2 mismatched doors on the front of it. So that's good to know. Thank you.
No problem.
Anything else? So otherwise, I will entertain a motion to approve the quote from Ebert Construction in the amount of $34,500.
So
Second.
We get that. All right. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bottoма,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Perfect. And Brad, in terms of the funding sources, that's something that needs to be determined now, or?
No, Mayor and Council, I think the direction I had is let's not use long range planning fund. And I support that certainly. So I'll see what makes the most sense, whether this is the 416 capital improvement fund or the general fund, and we'll park it one of those 2 places.
Perfect. Thank you. 10B, construction hours discussion, and Natalie will be presenting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the city of Corcoran currently allows construction activities to occur 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday, with those hours reduced to 9 a.m. From 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. on weekends and holidays. I was asked to do a little research into a few neighboring cities to see what their hours look like so we could have a discussion tonight. Predominantly, I do see a trend that allows construction to occur 7 days a week, but each city handles this a little bit differently. Most cities do allow 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. For example, Plymouth allows 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday through Friday. So that's one of the extremes that I saw. And then next slide. And then a few cities, while still allowing 7 days a week, have that restriction or limitation on weekends and holidays, similar to what we already have in place. One of the most restrictive cities I saw was Dayton, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. during the work week, and then 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on weekends and holidays, with the city able to impose additional restrictions. And then the next slide. And then I found 3 cities in Hennepin County that have some kind of prohibition during the weekend. Eden Prairie does not allow construction on Sundays or holidays, but does allow construction Monday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And the city manager can approve variations to this if there's good cause. Bloomington does not allow construction on Sundays in residential areas, but does allow it in industrial, business, and commercial zoning districts. And then Edina had the most elaborate scheme that I found. Projects valued under $25,000 were able to work on the weekends from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., weekends and holidays. And then projects valued at $25,000 or more could work 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Saturdays, but nothing was allowed on Sundays and holidays. Next slide. In my memo, I did discuss several pros and cons of each way cities can have chosen to handle this. Some considerations for your discussion. It could include our capacity as a city to enforce variations in construction hours, particularly if we will allow some projects to continue on Sundays while restricting others from moving forward on that day. There may also be some impacts to consider to homeowners working on their own building projects, or if there's emergency repairs that need to be completed. If we do want to move forward with further restricting some construction activities, we will want to make sure we have a clear definition of what would be allowed and what would not be permitted on Sundays. And so here's just a list that you can come back to in the discussion if you'd like. And next slide. Staff recommendation is to continue to allow construction activities 7 days a week, either by keeping our hours as is or reducing the weekend hours. It seems reasonable enough to have hours reduced to 8 to 4, such as something like Dayton has in place already. And we do think it'd be best to have these hours applicable to all construction activities rather than creating confusion by allowing some but not others. We also recommend to continue with administrative approval for when additional flexibility has a justifiable need. And that is all.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. Alan, I'll kind of start with you. I know you initially, this was kind of your idea to take a look into, and I kind of just wanted to get your thoughts on some of the staff recommendations and what you're thinking.
Well, I can tell you, like Mr. Hoagland, I've lived next to a development since its inception and had to listen to the sounds of excavators with their back sirens and whatnot, or air nailers from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. And then on the weekends, you do not get any type of reprieves. And we talk a lot about not burdening the existing residents of the city because of development. In my mind, there's no bigger burden than not being able to sit in your own yard without listening to something else going on to somebody else's profit. So with that, I would support reduction in hours, specifically on the weekend. I would love to see a caveat where we do not impact a homeowner from wanting to work on their own house, whether they need to change a door or roof or whatever. But the intent is more geared towards commercial development of large scale projects like what we're seeing with Ravinia and Tavera and Bellwether and all these other projects. And to say it's burdensome on a developer, it probably is to some extent. And no matter what we do, we would probably end up passing some costs on to the future homeowners. But they can meet construction deadlines by adding construction staff. That's not an issue if there's a time crunch. I just don't think it's right. And I've heard a lot of comments from people that why we have to put up with this noise. We do not get a reprieve from it. You come home from work and you'd like to get some time to relax in your own yard without having to deal with it. Some of these examples become too burdensome on staff. I agree with that. So I would propose more clear-cut, straight hours, but have some type of carve out for individual residents doing construction on their own dwelling.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. If Brad, do you think that's something that we could draft into it? Some sort of language where it's, if you're working on your own residence or your own property.
You can also, it's not to cut you off, Brad, but it's easy to write in language where there's a catastrophic event such came through like a couple of years ago where there's a hailstorms that does widespread damage, in an area, that you can relax restrictions to allow roofers to be working at 8 or 9 o'clock at night when they're replacing storm damaged roofs in an area or something to that effect. I'm sure we can come up with some type of flexibility.
Yeah, and maybe Natalie be best on that. Natalie, when you looked at the ones that had restrictions on additional development such as Dayton, is that something, for example, say Tavera comes through, future Tavera comes through, where we would be able to say new home construction for this development is limited until 9 to 5 on weekends? Or how would that work with development versus individual homeowners.
So I think that's what Edina was trying to do by having the class of permits to determine which projects could have operating hours throughout the weekend and which projects
Edina's all
couldn't.
about class, aren't they? Segregate by class.
Come
Yes.
on, don't go there.
And one
I
thing
just
to
did.
one thing to note with Edina is that scheme does require dedicated full-time staff. Just because the reality is if a neighbor hears power tools on a Sunday and they think that there shouldn't be any of that going on in their neighborhood, they're going to call the police, which requires the police to go out, and they're not going to, we don't currently have a system in place where the police would be able to easily look that up. I'm sure Edina has a process, but we don't have staff on Sunday ready to respond. So there would be some implications we would have to consider if we would want to move forward with something like that. That's why we were kind of more suggesting having just a blanket, still allowing construction 7 days a week, maybe reducing the hours a bit more, and having it apply to all construction activities to prevent any confusion for police officers going out to the property.
And with that being said, if the council felt that we could look at that, there's kind of two tiers here: the general hours you feel that make sense, and then if directed, so we could bring back an option to accomplish what you're talking about. I just triggered my memory regarding Mr. Hoagland's question on enforcement. What does happen right now, and it happened from Mr. Hoagland as well, there's a complaint that came in and was investigated by the cop, and at one point there was a citation issued as misdemeanor. Oftentimes it's education. It certainly creates a police report at the very least, and staff is notified of it. So if there are multiple violations that can be brought to attention, I know, for example, in the first couple phases of Ravinia, the violations were brought up at future phase approvals that, hey, we've had multiple now and we're factoring this into our approval process for you. So I think that's generally how that works.
Can I ask, Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
So there's, just to jump on what Brad said, I think there has to be, if we're going to have rules, and I think we already have rules that were broken a ton of times, because all of us would get calls at 7:30 on whatever mornings or 6:30 in the morning. And I can't remember there being too much in the way of consequences for running through our noise and weekend laws, because I think it was unclear, but sometimes you have to, it's a national builder, and not that that matters that much, but fines and warnings don't mean, it doesn't appear that they mean that much to people, because those violations happened over and over and over again. And so I think the issue is enforcement also. Like, we could have 100 new laws and rules, but if we don't have something and teeth to enforce it, it doesn't mean anything. So I think it's really important to do the front end, but also the back end on this, because there has to be an enforcement mechanism that the police are involved immediately and can shut down a project immediately, which I don't know has ever happened, but maybe you can educate me on that, Brad. But we got to be, if we're going to have new laws, we got to have good enforcement mechanics behind it too.
Aaron, I'll just jump in there. I know there's been some comments outside or after the fact, but as far as actual complaints coming in that this is happening now, somebody go investigate it, very, very few actually. And I guess maybe that's also a communication piece of, here's are the hours and here's what you do if you feel someone's in violation. Maybe we could do that part better as well. But yes, adequate enforcement has to take place too. And maybe when we bring it forward for the process, we can actually look back and see how many formal complaints we got. But it's probably less than you think. But certainly people are not happy about it, and that's why this council is looking at it.
So regarding if we were to reduce hours on Sundays and holidays, kind of where is everyone on are we leaning more towards like an 8 to 4 reduction, which I believe that the Dayton example was, prohibiting it entirely on Sunday, something in between that?
I'll take a shot at what I think would be something that I would like, and then we can, I don't know, negotiate up or down. I would stay away from Sundays, like in the sense, no construction on Sundays. I'm talking commercial, right? I like that if we can work up verbiage where residential, like if I am a homeowner, I want to do some stuff in my home, that shouldn't prevent me from working on my home. I think the bigger concern over here is the commercial development or new home permits. So for those, I would stay away from Sunday and I do 8 to 4 on Saturday. Is my preference, which I would like to have. But having said that, I'm open to suggestions and thoughts on how that would be a practical problem, if like considering what's going on in Corcoran right now.
I mean, I would have no problem with people. I think restricting it completely out on Sundays might get a little pushback, but definitely shortened hours. But I do think whatever we do has to have a caveat to allow private homeowners to work on their home. You know, most people are working outside of the home 5 days a week or whatever. They need those 2 days to get their projects done. So,
and I would think in terms of complaints, I mean, for the most part, you can tell when it's some person or their family working on their house versus a professional crew coming in and working on a site generally. So you would hope maybe that would help prevent a bunch of complaints coming in because they hear something on a Sunday. But yeah, I would hope that we could find a way to allow that in the actual text of it.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, we could even control it where we issue the permit, right? Like who we issue it to. If a homeowner is listed, when the permit is pulled, and say this are the hours you get, versus if Lennar is pulling a permit, or for that matter, any of the builders who are in Corcoran, like this is what you get. I think splitting that would be very important to me. I would not take away the flexibility of working the weekends a little late. Obviously, nothing too crazy, right? You're not going through a jackhammer in your house, taking out concrete at midnight. But for all reasonable purposes, I wouldn't want to restrict homeowners from able to do work.
Yeah,
we gotta have it tight, I guess. Some people's definition of reasonable is different
from others.
True. True. So back to the hours then. I tend to agree with Alan that maybe a full prohibition on Sunday might be, I'm not opposed to it, but it might be a bit much, and there might be some middle ground there of, I'm definitely in favor of restricting the hours.
Now, if I can't get my Chick-fil-A, you can't build anything.
That's what we'll base it on.
I mean, I don't think Dayton's hours are really that bad, to be honest with you. 7 to 7.
Oh, you're talking weekday?
Weekdays 7 to 7, 8 to 4 on weekends.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that was restrictive at all, to Alan's point.
And then, you have a caveat in there for private residents, and then a caveat for large scale insurance events.
That works for me.
Brad, do we need to put fines, and like if your company gets busted twice, you can't work here for 6 months, or do we actually need to put consequences in this draft discussion? Because it can't just be willy-nilly, can it?
No, and let's see if Matt's listening in, besides getting all of his work done here. From the enforcement side, Matt, I believe anything violating city code ordinance is just a general misdemeanor with whatever fine that is. Can you provide any more clarity on that?
Yeah, it would depend on how it's written. So, I mean, most of our, code enforcement per se is handled from a planning perspective. The law enforcement response is typically for the criminal ones, and we have to be pretty clear on what's a law enforcement and a criminal response versus what is a civil or a code response. So when you start talking about shutting down projects or taking what would be a civil action of shutting down a project, that's usually pursuant to a court or a judge's order. Now, the other way to shut down a project is if there's criminal sanctions and you're arresting the person who's refusing to comply repeatedly with that law. So it's a little bit, if you're looking at larger scale addressing repeated violations with a large scale builder, you're probably looking at more a code enforcement type response, and certainly law enforcement can document those types of things. But as far as using color of law to force a civil remedy is not something that we can do in that regard. So if there are criminal sanctions, we can certainly issue citations, and if a person continues to violate a criminal law of our community, we can arrest them as necessary to prevent further criminal conduct. So it doesn't make it perfectly clear, but you certainly, I think you can write criminal sanctions, but I think you need to be clear as to whether we're talking about criminal or civil remedy for this solution. And maybe there's different scenarios for each.
And I'll just add for, every home that's being under construction, it's a different crew. So if you have, 6 crews out there, you have 6 personal, 4 persons who are in charge of the project that are all different. And every single time it's a different person. So, then it goes back to its education and working with the developer. I know when we had that summer when there were significant issues, that then resulted in much more signage, communication to their subs. And it was it helped certainly.
Isn't it the if you have a subcontractor, isn't it the responsibility of the contractor then to keep their subs? And if it's a violation of a builder, the contractor potentially could be fined rather than the sub, right? So, I mean, if you've got 10 or 15 subcontractors and we have 200 homes being built, you're looking at 400 different companies that could be out here. And if you want to get someone's notice, do one of the 400 at a time educating them. You want to have the people responsible be the GC, right? Is that possible to hold the GC responsible for what the subs do?
Well, I think, and that's where Matt's getting to, the criminal side versus the civil side. Have Matt chime in here again, but if there's a criminal activity, it's the individual who's doing the action violating the law. Where if there's this more of a civil path, code enforcement related, I think there's more options there. So and we don't need to get into, I think as staff, we understand you want something that's enforceable and some way to change the behavior if there's a problem. So we hear you loud and clear. Then we can try to bring you some options for that.
I hear you. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself.
So with respect to hours and days, Brad, you have what you need, and then you're going to draft how can we make this enforceable and what's the nice way to put this up in our code. Is that what I'm hearing?
Just to make sure though, there was a couple different options, but last I heard was the date and hours with a caveat for homeowners and post-storm events potentially, and then an enhanced enforcement process.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Good deal.
Sleep.
Alrighty. So 10C, Sergeant and Canine Handler appointment process.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So our previous staffing plans had the inclusion of a sergeant in 2021 and another sergeant in 2022. As you know, at the beginning of 21, Officer Peter Eckenberg was promoted to the sergeant position. In addition to that, we had 2 patrol officers that separated from the city during the past couple of years here. So we were left with 3 patrol officer vacancies. We just ran a patrol officer hiring process, and we were able to hire 2 new officers from there. But that leaves 1 position vacant. And again, there was a little bit of a delay since we're just having the 2nd officer starting this week, actually. And then Clay Decker was the previous officer that was hired. So those delays, those positions were all in this year's budget for the entire year. And basically we've been, because of the manner in which previous employees separated, there was a long period of time where they were still employed but not able to work So we've been kind of behind in our staffing issues for quite some time, and we're really looking to try and catch up with that. In addition, we have a K-9 appointment that'll be coming up. So there's a lot of moving pieces when it comes to our staffing. So what I'm asking for from the council is authority to begin a recruitment process for the second sergeant position. We are currently running a patrol officer process as well to backfill those vacancies, but and then also authorization to run another process and have the appointment for the K-9 position. So if those things were to happen, the city would still ultimately realize a savings from the absent staffing position. So the budget would support those changes. But it's really important for us to just get moving as quickly as possible on trying to get our appointments and try and get back up to full staff. We've been running at a pretty bare bones staffing for quite some time. So I'm certainly willing to answer any questions that any of you might have, but really just seeking to begin the recruitment and hiring process for the police sergeant, and then authorization for the to hold a K-9 handler selection process, and for me to appoint the preferred candidate.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Any questions for Matt?
Nope.
No.
Okay. If not, then I will go ahead and entertain a motion to authorize the police department to begin recruitment and the hiring process for the police sergeant position, authorize the director of public safety to hold a K-9 handler selection process, and appoint the preferred candidate to the K-9 handler position.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bottoма?
Aye.
Nichols? Not here. Schultz?
Aye.
Thomas?
Aye.
I Ron Burgundied it. I read across the
I was gonna vote for him if you didn't change quick.
Oh boy. Okay, that carries. So we are on to 10D, city meeting format. Brad.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. As noted in the packet, the governor's executive order on masks has expired and actually is effective tomorrow. The distancing requirement is no longer existing as well. So with that, it's really an opportunity for the council to discuss the meeting format moving forward. And there's really two parts here. One is the in-person for the city council itself, as well as the public. And the second part being when it goes to entire in-person for the council, whether to retain a virtual option for residents. And as far as the staff recommendation here, and we're very comfortable moving in person. We are able to have attendees in person as well. We have better technology than ever before, where we actually have also a TV we can set up in the lobby, so we can have some distancing, not 6 foot certainly, but have an area on the side of the chambers as well as in the lobby to have people come to City Hall and still feel safe. The council dais is not that big. I could pick up and turn my computer, I guess, but it certainly would be, 2 or 3 feet in between council members and staff. And really looking for what the council wants to accomplish. As soon as the governor's executive order does expire, we must come back. And your votes, other than a medical appropriate condition up to 3 times a year, you can't vote if you're virtual after that point. So it's really when the council wants to move in person and also retaining, whether or not to retain the hybrid option or the virtual option for community members. At the staff level, we feel it's important. We've had more engagement than probably ever due to it. And we have investments that should allow it. We had a practice run today and it was not great, but we'll get there. And we will get it done. So really just looking for council feedback so we can make the notices appropriate and plan ahead.
Thanks, Brad. Well, I'll kind of start us off with a couple of my thoughts. I think for the retaining the virtual option for residents, I'm strongly in favor of that. I think that's been one of the few kind of silver linings of all this, is that we've gained that ability kind of, and we have the tech improvements to be able to do that. And I think long-term, I'd love to see that go on forever, where people eventually can have the option to come in person, hop on if they're out of town or don't want to come down to City Hall for an entire night because they have one thing that they're concerned about or want to speak on. So I think that's really important that we keep that. Regarding us and when we go back to in-person full-time, I kind of think it makes sense for us to kind of have a couple hybrid sessions as we're transitioning to full in-person. I know it's what a couple other cities nearby have discussed recently. And then obviously that's dependent on when or if the governor's order ends sooner than anticipated. Then obviously we'd be transitioning back to full in-person at that point. But personally, I think it makes sense for us to do maybe a couple hybrid where we have 2 or 3 council members in chambers. And Brad and I were talking about this a little bit before, where we could have some space for residents in person and online, and try to work out the kinks in terms of doing a in-person public comment opportunity to an online, and hearing people speak on both, and just the tech side of it, how we handle it. So that's just kind of my 2 cents on it.
I would agree with you that allowing virtual for community members is a good idea. I mean, we definitely have seen a lot more people engaged in the city having that option. Personally, as soon as I can get back in the city chambers, I'm going to do it. I wouldn't, if you want to try a hybrid thing, it doesn't bother me, but I'm not going to sit at home to do it, because frankly, when we had the work session on goal setting, I was the only one, I think, that wasn't in attendance, and I think I was at a disadvantage in the communication side of it. So
Gotcha.
I wouldn't recommend anybody sit at home once everyone else is in chambers. But
I miss you too, Alan.
I can't wait till we hug again. But
yeah, so I agree with both of them. So I think the option for the residents to participate both virtually and in hall it's mandatory. So, I mean, for me, it's not even up to debate. We should be able to enable that with the advancements we have seen. With respect to us being in, I know that we have some exceptions with medical and things like that. So the concern I have with that is, what would you qualify as a medical, right? So if I have flu-like symptoms, do I walk in because I know it's flu, but how comfortable are you guys around me at that time? Should I, like, that's where I'm like a little tricky on what are we going to do and not, since what you're dealing with is something that's very flu-like. Some clarity there will help me understand.
Stay home.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't want you sitting within 4 feet of me if you got the flu.
You're the one who wants to hug. It's not me. Because I have small kids, they go to daycare. So somebody at the home, I don't know, home is always going to be sniffing. So, and we get tested often, and we know it's not COVID, but I don't want to like force you guys to go have to go out there and test because you started sniffing, and even if it's the common cold there. So just wanted to ask the question.
I mean, I think at the point that the governor's order is done, and potentially well before that, if that's when we decide to transition fully to in-person, that determination is, I don't know exactly how it works, I guess.
Because if I'm comfortable coming in, because I know I don't have COVID, I got tested, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I heard Brad say that would, but if I am virtual, I can't vote. I don't want to give up my vote because I have the cold.
Right.
Right. So how do we handle that? And I didn't know that you have to be in person to keep your vote, and maybe that's education I should have had. So
I think in normal times that's how it always has been. It's just we've been in this emergency powers world for a while now. But in the short term, I think having that hybrid model I suggested would give flexibility for however long we decided to do that, a couple meetings or whatever.
Flexibility in what way, Tom?
In terms of
all of us?
Well, yeah, in terms of whoever, if you decided, well, we're still hybrid, that you didn't want to go in for, you were worried about a sniffle or something like that, or any reason in the time being, that you'd be able to still attend remotely.
Yeah, I guess I would respectfully ask that if you think that you have something bad that we could get, you stay home, period. Whether it be pre-COVID, post-COVID, period.
Yeah.
We go to church, we go to the store, we go to restaurants. And I feel like if you wanted to come in and wear a mask, that's your prerogative, but everything else is opening up. And analytically speaking, those who have a vaccine have got it. Those who don't want to get a vaccine don't have it. Pretty much everybody's living a normal life. And I think we're all prepared as a society to go back with even with the downfall or the consequence of if you get sick, you can't vote. I mean, that's certainly an advantage, but it's against the law once that declaration is lifted. I asked Brad today if we could, there are certain entities where you could give your vote to the chairperson or give your vote to somebody else, and you can't at city council, just if you're thinking of that. So my choice would be to commence in person. And I think, would there ever be a restriction on public being, like, we're constitutional, we have to be there, but would there ever be a restriction constitutionally about public giving input to a meeting virtually? I can't imagine there would be, but is there such a thing?
No, I don't believe so. And really, it's the constitutional requirement or the city requirement is to hold hearings as required by law. So it's up to the city how it chooses to hold those hearings and take formal input. So the cities certainly can say we only hold hearings at City Hall, and only those who are present, their views are the only ones that count. We're obviously not talking about that. I'm not hearing that from anybody. So that's a city choice. Now,
Yeah,
my understanding, however, and it's not universal, but the guidance I've heard is once the building is open for the entire city council, that it should be open for the public as well. And we're prepared to do that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I'm here anyway, each time regardless. So it's not a huge difference to me. I guess I don't know where Councilor Nichols is on this, what his comfort level is, and same with kind of it would also apply to the Planning Commission, Parks and Trails, and Charter Commission as well, I believe, whatever
Tom?
decision we made. Yeah.
I mean, I guess the decision to come back is not up to us, right? We have to be in. I think the decision over here is, are we going to keep the hybrid model for the residents to participate? Is that what I'm hearing? Like, that is it, right? Yeah. So, and I irrespective of where Jeremy is, like, I really can't believe that he would be against getting, but I can't speak for him, right? Because that's how we started engaging with the city, and multiple times we've heard all of us say we love the new format. So I think the decision that to be had over here is, do we continue with the hybrid format? And I think we should. The decision to come back in, it's not up to us. We have to be in constitutionally, right? I think the only question is, you end up losing a vote, because earlier, if it's a slight sniff, like you take ibuprofen and walk in and with a mask, that I'm comfortable. But now I would have a heavier weight with that decision, saying, you know what, I'm going to give up my vote for my fellow councilman, right? Except John, I'm going to hug him anyway. So, but otherwise, just stay away. I think that's what consciously we're going to end up doing.
Yeah, I think our decision is do we want to come back earlier than the end of the executive order?
And it's, do we all want to come in earlier than the executive order?
I won't be here next meeting, no matter what.
Okay. Then do we want to?
Mayor and Council, so with that, I'm certainly hearing that Councilmember Schultz is ready to come in. We could certainly just plan on at least, if Councilmember Bottom is not here, the full council has not officially, I guess, been at the meeting.
Together.
So the guidance we receive from the city attorney is, once everyone comes together, it really deems that there's no need to have a virtual requirement, because the emergency has been okay to do it once, so you must. So if we know that Councilor Bottom is not going to be here on the 10th, we could certainly open it up as whoever member wants to show up in person, we'll do that. I'd like to know in advance who's going to do that, so we could kind of practice it at the staff level a little bit. And then we would also open up to the public for those who want to attend in person as well as virtual. What I would recommend is maybe it's effective at the formal meeting at 7 o'clock, because to coordinate the entire planning commission with the city council, in person, maybe that's actually a better meeting to have virtually. So maybe we'll leave that one all virtual.
Okay.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Well, that might be difficult for council members if they're
Yeah.
gonna try to travel between the two meetings. But you could certainly have the commission members all be virtual for that meeting.
Yeah, yes, I agree with that. And unless we just have people set up, bring your laptop and attend virtually, and you can sit in a cube over, at the staff spot or something, and then just
Yeah.
walk over to the council chambers.
What's prevent them from being there live? If they're right there, is there a problem with that if we're all together in the same room?
I think Brad was just saying the coordination of that number, the
Oh,
whole
okay.
planning commission, the whole council.
Yeah, you'd have 10 members, all who you want to communicate with. Normally we just have a big table on the floor
Yeah.
here. We'd have some up top and some below. But if we'd have some virtual, I'd maybe just recommend a Zoom meeting. And
Okay.
let's get guidance tonight from you. I think the main part is for the council meeting, and we can work out the details after that too.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about the virtual attendance from the public when we go back to in chambers meetings? What are we going to have? I mean, you say there's technology in place, but does that mean that council members are going to have to put on headsets every time that somebody from the public calls in, or?
No, it should just play on the speakers, right? In chambers.
Yep, mayor and council. So we can practice today, and we have to work some bugs, but essentially we put they're up on the screen. If they have if they go live on video, they're up on the screen, or else it's just the audio that goes through the council chambers. So if it works well, it's pretty slick.
And then
Okay.
we have our.
It'll work.
Yep. And then any material that we put up on our overhead screens would appear on the video as well. Okay.
Correct.
Yep. Great.
Okay. So do we want to, since as you mentioned, since John, you're not going to be there on the 10th, have that be the hybrid and take it from there on how that goes? Open it up to people to come in and to those who want to on the council. And then I guess assess at that point if we want to jump to the full required in person after that, or do another hybrid.
If I understand what Brad was saying from the attorney's advice, if John's not in attendance and the other four of us are peer, then from that point on, we always have to appear. Is that correct?
Jessica, do you know how that works?
Different than how I was understanding it. So it's.
Yeah, I think it's a little gray probably, because technically all the members who are participating would be in person.
I don't know exactly, but my understand, I would think that it would be if you have all the members present in person, then it would likely be, but I'd want to confirm with the city attorney.
Okay.
We can do that tomorrow.
Okay.
And then the other part of the discussion point is really related to, if you want to discuss it, the public input virtually, whether it's, as I mentioned, the report, sign up in advance. And the mayor and I were talking before the meeting, which is kind of one of the benefits of being in person. You can actually talk a little bit here and there, is maybe having a guideline where you should be signing up before the meeting to speak virtually. Just like if you come to City Hall, we say, hey, what brings you in today? If you want to speak, okay, here's your card, fill it out, give it back, we'll get you on. But then maybe just go to an open forum where anybody who didn't sign up, who wants to speak on anything tonight, it's one open forum, other than if it's a form of public hearing in the meeting. So it's not so many different choppy spots. Now, again, anyone who signs up, we would have them, okay, we're to item 8A. We have one person who wants to sign up. We'll recognize them on Zoom. But I think it'd be good to help streamline the council meetings moving forward too.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think we still have something up on the city website kind of regarding that from just in-person meetings, so we could just kind of re-implement that and add the online component to it. But that makes sense to me, if for nothing else, to just get a sense of when we know there'll be 20 people wanting to talk, or an item where we know no one wants to speak on, just to give us a little bit of a heads up as to when those points in the meetings will be and when those meetings will be.
So instead of having basically 3 comment periods or 4 comment periods, it would be 1 open forum, but then allow people to speak right before the topic at hand if they present a card before.
They present a card if they're in person, or if they will have an email or a phone number they can call if it's virtual. So basically going back to, however, again, people can speak on an item at the item as long as they just do a minimal thing, either filling out a card or emailing somebody.
That's going to be more choppy than now. I mean, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 spots for public comments. In theory, if people just hand a card and I want to speak on 7J, I want to speak on 8B, someone else, I mean, I want to be clear, have clarity on that part of it. Am I wrong about that? We could have 16 people speak at 16 different spots.
Correct, and that's really how it worked previously to COVID as well. But how it worked in the meeting, the mayor would tend to look over and just kind of say, anybody? Nope, and we'd move on. Versus, let's have a public comment period. Jessica, can you explain how it goes? And then we have, 4 of them tonight, and at 3 of them nobody spoke. So I think it ultimately streamlines it, and we can work out those details as we get into it too. But I think it would work out.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't mind the process, as long as if we find out it doesn't work, to John's point, it's becoming more choppier than we expected. Just reward, like, it could be something we try in the new hybrid model that we are kind of trying to enable, because the old world didn't have the hybrid version. But on a related topic, sorry to ransack the topic a little bit. So I was having a chat with a couple of residents, and one of the things that came about was awareness for the public comment opportunity, right? Is there a way that we can consolidate, saying, hey, this month, these are all the public comment opportunities that are what we're going to handle, and put it on the city website and make sure that goes out in the newsletter for the month, or something like that, where, when there's enough information saying, hey, these are the 6 topics and these are the dates. Yes, we would end up maybe moving something, and there'll be some that changes, but at least there's heads up on opportunities, other than somebody constantly tracking our council packets and stuff. That's just comment opportunities are kind of listed for awareness in both print as well as social media.
Well, we have a sign-up process, correct, where residents can provide their email address and receive a link to the packet when the packet's published. So if a resident instead of having to go in and track all the time, they would get that email and they could just see it. So
yeah, let's talk about the CUP that, or not the CUP, the conditional use discussion we were having, right? How many landowners are actively tracking this is happening? Well, it's going to impact quite a bit of them, right? So I mean, just saying it, if it's not too much of a work, if we can consolidate, we know what is our comment opportunities. I don't see a harm in fighting that request where, it's a Facebook post maybe to start off with, if the newsletter is too much to manage, and put it up there.
There's public comment in right before every meeting. 100% of the meetings we've ever had has been.
Yeah, but I think
topics.
I think Manoj's point is putting out like public notice of what's on the upcoming meeting. But to me, the process where people can register an email address, we can automate that so that we don't have to take staff time. As soon as they post it, boom, the email goes out, and we don't have to worry about cutting and pasting and putting, well, how do I word this part of the topic, and do I put it on Facebook? Do I put it on the city webpage? How do I disseminate it? It's already out there.
Agreed. And I'm not saying this has to be in this certain format, right? I'm like, alerts go out, and it can be get more subscriptions in, kind of get that awareness out, that if you want to be aware of everything, sign up, right? Maybe that's the way to go about it. Like, just something we can do over there to just increase information.
Maybe a
float
good
out
first
there.
step would be to have something put up on the city website and on city social media pointing out how you can sign up for those alerts with the council packets. I know I've made a couple posts about it and a lot of people didn't know that existed. I kind of found it by accident one time. So maybe we could get something like that up if it's not already, Brad. Would that be doable?
Yes,
Yes, I was just gonna say, we just had a article in the last newsletter that outlined how to sign
Awesome.
up for that.
Nice.
So we could also highlight that on social and just try to periodically remind people of those options.
Yeah, I will say every newsletter for the past probably 2 years, we've had that in that's been mailed to every single
Gotcha.
person. But the updates that go out for council meeting coming up, actually, I think usually says, here's a couple of things that are on the agenda. Jess CB came to my office this morning, was all excited. We had 700 and some likes on Facebook. So we continue to, up here and there. So I feel like we're doing everything we can other than making people read the council meetings. And that being
Right.
said, we have really good participation, which maybe it's a sad statement, but in talking to a lot of my peers out there, Corcoran has an awful lot of participation compared to other cities. So I think it's doing pretty good. We can always do better, but the packet does go out on every Friday. There's an automatic link. That's the best version. That's usually our first thing we tell people whenever they come to City Hall and ask what's going on. The best thing you can do is sign up for this. As far as the agenda, it's constantly changing. I mean, it gets finalized by the Thursday night before it gets printed Friday morning, and I always have the last item is the next 2 or 3 meetings, but how often is that accurate?
Right.
So it's until the meeting is printed, it's pretty uncertain to have what's going in there.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I think if we
had
could
to
just
bring
make
it up.
a social post or two on kind of where to find that, there's the subscribe button and where to type in your info, and you can set the different frequency of notifications. If we can highlight that in a post or two, I think that'd be a good step.
Mayor and Council really brings up a really good opportunity that we have to make sure if we're making this change, we got to communicate the heck out of it and make those things known again.
Yeah. Sounds good. Anything else anyone wants to add?
Nope.
Okay. Then next up is 10E, which is city council terms, roles, etc.
Mayor and Council, not too much to add to the ones in the packet. Really, the Cliff's notes of it is we can't establish term limits for city council members. We certainly can establish limits and who can be in office for the commissions, the Parks and Trails Commission, the Planning Commission, and then anything related to the Charter Commission really takes an amendment to the Charter Commission. And I guess my recommendation is, I know that's already been a directive of the council. When the Charter Commission meets, put it on the agenda to have some of these discussions. We at the staff level, we're certainly ready to have that. So any other direction you have, we'll just listen in and go from there.
Okay. Anyone have anything to start us off?
My only comment on commissions, as far as the terms go for planning and parks, is they're 3-year terms currently, correct? So these people have to reapply every 3 years, whether we want to effectively term them out at 3 years and bring somebody else in. I think we just leave it as is and make that decision at that time, whether we have other viable applicants or we value the service that they've done. I think we can just figure that out at that point versus having a hard stop.
Regarding
The commission.
planning and
Parks and Trail. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So this is something that I brought up in the last couple of times, right? So because of what we know now that we can't do it at the council level, and obviously the charters, we already have plans on what we want to do with common seats between the charter and the council. To Alan's point, the commissions were never the objective, because again, they come to us and whoever's on the council can decide if somebody has served for too long or too less, or if there's a need to look at a term there. So at this point in time, I think I'll just pull that request if everybody agrees that we don't have to discuss that further and take our time.
Works for me.
I would, I'd be okay doing what we can to when I was on the watershed committee, I had been there for like 3 years, and everybody else had been there for like 15 or 20 years. And it became a little bit institutionalized by 7 people. And we were appointed by the city council. And I imagine they went every year to the city council. Yeah, keep doing it. Yeah, keep doing it. And they become stale. And I don't want to say fiefdoms, but in the watershed commission, they became fiefdoms, and they were like, those 7 had more power than any elected officials in any city in Hennepin County, except maybe Minneapolis. So I think that Manoj, I like your idea of term limits. And if you say, well, term limits are good for elected officials, I think they'd be good for commissions too, because for the same reasons. We need new ideas. We need fresh blood. We need turnover. It makes our town healthier. It makes people accountable. People get in somewhere for 10 years and there has to be turnover in order to hold some people accountable. So if you like term limits for council, I think you would want term limits for every other constitutional position that you could do too, for the same reasons. But
absolutely.
My opinion would be have term limits for whatever you can have term limits for. I've got self-imposed ones, and Manoj, I think that I thought you said your limit was 18 months, so I'm cool with that.
No. I mean, absolutely on point, right? I mean, Alan's right, where we can enforce them, but here's a scenario, right? Like if you have term limits for commissions and they know they have 2 terms and they have to take a break before they come in and apply back again, it's just part of the process. But you have somebody who's really controversial, like take Chair Dean, for example, right? He's great. When he comes back, how are you going to look at him and say, you know what, we want fresh ideas? Like he's contributed so much for the city. But if there's limits, then you get new people applying for the positions. So we don't have to like tell people we're going to take you off for good. We're doing so well for the city so far. So I like term limits. I like term limits across the board. I just didn't want to be the only one saying we need term limits. I gotta hold the council's time up. But if there was support, that's something definitely I would like to encourage.
So now there are 2 of them. Like I think Dean's not, like, this isn't a knock on anybody. I think we should have national term limits. The average senator has been there forever. So like if you
staleness is what we want out, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you said that, Dean, you've done a good job, but 2 terms is like the maximum. It wouldn't be personal. He'd probably enjoy some freedom.
We've told that to the best presidents.
Alan.
No, we have told that to the best presidents we have had, and we've told that to the worst presidents we have had, right? So, I mean, if it's good enough at that rate, that's why I brought it up for the council. But to your point, I would do it for the commissions. Alan, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think the commissions are a little bit different in that because they reapply every 3 years. The council can make the discretion at that time whether they feel they're stale or if they're really adding value to the city by being on there. I'd agree with you. If you're running for U.S. Senate, it's a little bit different. You're not dropping $20 million for a lifetime retirement package. We're not paying that kind of money here to be on the planning commission in city of Corcoran. Last time I've seen nobody's can't. Well, you have to beg people to be on these.
I know.
I'm hoping that changes soon, but
yeah.
Well, it sounds like the way to do both the council potentially and the commissions would be through the charter commission and then one of those processes. So maybe do we propose both of them to the charter commission and see what they come out with, and then based on their recommendation, maybe they feel one way about commission seats and one way about council, or the other way around, and then take it from there.
Yeah, I would be open to letting them debate that over, because it's a charter decision. If let them do their job.
John and Alan, does that work for you guys?
Yeah, I mean,
Or
it's,
vote on it.
What's that?
to me, I personally don't even think we need to look at planning and parks and trails. I mean, that Manoj made a point about not being on two commissions at once. I think that's a good idea.
Mhm.
To me, it's more about, the charter commission. That's the most important one.
Right.
Do we vote on this? How does this go? Like to decide what our recommendation, or is just guidance to Brad?
I think Brad just wanted direction. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say let's kick the whole thing to them, right? Like figure out, do they make sense for the council? What commissions for it to make sense? We definitely like the idea of not having the same person serve on two commissions or other roles for that matter, right? Because the reserve program came into picture and there's a lot more that came. So just look at it holistically and say, are you duplicating? Can you duplicate certain roles or people across roles, and also term limits across the board on what we can do, and let them come back with a recommendation.
Yeah, and if we did that, we'd still have the opportunity to vote on it and discuss it at that time if we wanted to go forward with whatever their recommendation was as a charter amendment. So
yeah,
it would give us, give us a chance at that point to decide if we wanted to go forward with that.
If we do it in the next 12 months so I can vote on it.
Does that work for everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine.
Okay. Was there anything else in there? Conflict of interest. Am I missing anything, guys? Or did we cover the main issues there?
No, the main weight of it was really how to make changes to the charter commission was a big part of the memo.
Gotcha. Okay. Then if there's nothing else, we will move on to 11B, which is pandemic response update. Matt or Brad?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not a ton to add. I mean, things are still trending in the right direction. You're starting to see incentives for people getting vaccinated out there. So I still wouldn't have waited for mine, but it's nice to start seeing things returning to normal. Staff has been relatively healthy, and we're trying to look for any ways we can to start returning to business as usual. So Brad or Jess, if you have anything else.
No, not much to add, just that, we're having in-person meetings. A few of us sat at a board table with, 10 people around it, close together. It felt really weird. But we're going back to normal, I guess.
Thank God.
Yeah. All right. Then with that, we have the council schedule in the packet. We'll see how much that changes between now and then. But other than that, I will go ahead and make a motion to adjourn.
So moved or seconded.
You get the second. I get my one motion.
Yeah.
All right, roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bottoма.
Nay for Jeremy.
Schultz.
Abstained.
Oh, God. Thomas.
Yeah.
So
2-1.
2-2-1-1. Okay.
2-1-1. We're good.
You're
That
good,
works.
right? That's why I went that way. I wanted to go abstain, but I was like,
Yeah.
Have
One
fun, guys.
absent, 3 abstentions, and a yay. All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.